Sorry, my microphone was off. Before I begin, I just have some people I need to thank. First of all, the NSDA for organizing this great tournament in the face of such uncertainty. My cousins, Paul and Claire, without them, I never would have gotten into debate. My coaches, Miss Beck, who organized so many practice rounds and judged some too, Miss Sambo as well, Miss Mercury, Mr. McCollum, Simi, Hale, Anna, Ovia, Varsha, Wamin, Phoenix, Jack, Towns, who all helped me prep a ton. Caitlin, my amazing policy partner. I'm really going to miss you next year, and I wish you the best of luck. Grace, Gabe, Will, Ari, Opie for always being there, Albert and Audrey, my first LD coordinators, Preeti for always being a great person to talk to, Parkway West, and the entire Eastern Missouri NSDA district. Emmanuel, are you good?
Ready to go.
All right. Resolve, predictive policing is unjust. Policing is not benign enforcement of the order, but weaponizes the terror granted material from the form that operates under the suspension of the ability to unleash total violence. The call to order is to weaponize the world and demand form in accordance with the racializing assemblage of the modern man. The resolution is a call to worship, to sing the praise of the state. This ritual call to worship finds its genesis in the psychosocial structure of whiteness, social production of misery. This white atonement defines the performances that are the constituted of proper life in the contradiction of the horizon of death that is blackness must be cleansed. Only the AC can form practices of health and not dependent on death. Carter 19. The social production of misery is racialized structurally and constitutively anti-black. Psychic structures of social activity. Whiteness as an ideal of structure of melancholy cannot find its way to leftist lost object go. Americas was founded on the male contact related to black life needed labor, but it did not want to be contaminated by it. The social imagination which through the imagination is good, evil life, and what evil must be slain. Whiteness becomes blackness, Whiteness becomes life, blackness becomes death, staved off as the horizon of death to secure proper life, the basic atonement structure that animates the world. Malpractice do not support life, actively forward the health projections of the ideal of the body politic life itself. Stave off pathogenic infection before the horizon of death, the imminent work of salvation. Malpractice bespeaks anxiety with the failure to manage and secure life, to invest in reproducing the policy of propriety. We need to breach whiteness and white folk got that lead to breach. Certain people suffer, gets rationalized as appropriate. We need another imagination. This form of capitalism has shifted to the logistical code to teach us to continuously improve and assemble what can only be disassembled, to assemble ourselves so that the general disassembly of the social factory may be assembled, demanding access to access to find our social flow in the general economy of care can be restricted in the economy of the factory. All that is left is to continue the ways that we hold up each other in sabotage, beautiful monstrosities that can only threaten assembly. Hartney 15. Practice of continuous improvement. Workers organize the assembly line, disassembled and reassembled society to seek out continuous improvement management. Followed workers in Exodus. Calculation itself gave birth to the social factory, applied to the growing capacity of the algorithm to improve continuously. Unfinishing work, preventing its closure. The thought of the excess of value restricted economy of the factory encounters the general economy of the algorithmic society, never agreeing to limit. Labor is actively unfinished. It must be constantly reassembled. We must assemble ourselves collectively to limit the production line in the social factory to capital. Radical access to labor means full access to the earth, to capital in the form of debt, being financialized. Total violence demand for total access of the flesh. The settler presented himself as the bearer of the property. The indentured queer figures of fear direct threats to the production line. Saboteurs scattered along the social death factory line demonstrates access to your life with its violent logistical capitalism. Hold these hands up. It looks as a demon to them, but it looks beautiful. The affirmative is a strategy of black malpractice. We have found the state order as it's already ruptured. There's care in the excesses of rupture. Our access is not access to personhood, but access to the excessive unseen rupture of standing without ground, entanglement within separation of invisibly seen, but definitely felt moments of care that recharge social energy. Carter 19. The sacred is excessive. This unbounded sociality concerns blackness as infinity. Black sarcastically secures a liveliness occasioned by the spiritual ordeal of death. The sacred as pathological forms of life in representations, colonializing ruins. Alternative ways of being beneath the earth. Godless mysticism. Indeterminate non-existence on the far side bespeaks an interior collective aliveness, constantly ready, poised for the unexpected, moved to terrified to love, live magically, drunkenly, wateringly, wondrously, and the radicality of a certain moving stillness, non-performative breach of the racial contract. We might have found that time is also trapped. It is not past, but recruited towards an index of bodies showing linear progression, as always, caught in the movement towards whiteness, towards evolving towards man. Even reforms are instituted, even as a state redeemed itself in the ethicality of the law. It is always trapped in the move towards the violence that time subtends. The stopwatch of violence is counting up, not down. But J.K. Carter reminds us we can always step aside to patch each other's wounds, to love, to count ourselves into the project of love and bodies. Thus, The former debates is appealing to the judicial assemblage of intergenerational violence, allows the law to territorialize life itself, eliminating what remains outside the law, operates on a framework of personhood as property that directs violence at the right targets while re-territorializing the racializing assemblage of the modern man, Mohilean 14. Legal personhood dominates our world, not lose sight of what remains outside the law, what it cannot transform into ownership. That focus on legal framework creates unequal life chances, lead to only a delimited notion of personhood. This can be gleaned from the success of mainstream civil rights, which facilitate the incorporation of a privileged minority, but at the cost of the criminalized to make claims for inclusion removes from the view that law itself has been thoroughly violent. International warfare, providing strategies that life worlds not exclusively centered on reforming the law. Maroon abolitionism, an example of how abject modes of being not need be deployed within hegemonic frameworks to abolish the grounds upon which all forms of subjugation are administered. And movements are not just abstractions or overlapping circuit points on the global sphere, but ongoing resistances that happen in our thoughts, actions, provocations, explorations. Our model of debate seeks to extend towards new levels of understanding and imminent processes of resistance that unleash beautiful insurgencies from the ground up. This is a work without a beginning, without an end, constant planning as opposed to a policy that we take with us wherever we go. Shukaitis and Graeber 7. The work of Milton investigation is multiple, extending antagonism to new levels of understanding. Milton investigation discovers new possibilities within the present, turning dead ends into joyful insurgency. Holloway helped to compile a book on essays on the Zapatistas. The beginning is the scream faced with the mutilation of the theoretical reflection. Is the opposition liberatory struggle? Is the struggle against identity? True revolutionary knowledge would be different. Pragmatic knowledge, fierce debates ensued. In Latin America, arguments turn around the very particular questions of revolutionary strategy. Who has the better world? Who has the better model, Zapatistas or Chavez Bolivarian revolution? I'm ready for cross-ex.
All right. Good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. What does the app do?
Our advocacy is black malpractice.
What is black malpractice?
So we say that violence is not contingent, but a condition of racial terror that positions blackness as a cause of pathology that needs to be eliminated. And the criminalization of blackness results in the force of gratuitous violence, as blackness always comes to embody the threat of society. And this is psychologically disavowed to maintain the coherence of liberal modernity, and the abjection of blackness outside the world serves as the 0 point of total negativity from which to find and build value.
Okay, cool. What does the AC? So if we vote AF, what happens?
I mean, well, there is no judge. No one is voting AF.
In a hypothetical world where we vote AF, what happens?
I don't see the reason to answer that question because there's no judge.
Okay, so then why? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about. So what parts of like the resolution do you agree with?
I'm sorry, you just cut out.
Oh, sorry. What parts of the resolution do you disagree with?
I mean, like endorsing the state.
That's the only part?
I mean, I feel like that's, I don't know, this is a very short resolution.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about. All right. So what's the impact of like what Battaglia is talking about?
What do you mean?
Or like, what's the impact of the AF?
Like violence against, like, I mean, pathologization of Black people that they need to be eliminated, gratuitous violence, and like the vision of Blackness as a threat to society.
Okay, how does black malpractice solve that?
Black malpractice, so like the Wahilia evidence defines violence as a result of the socio-political processes that discipline bodies into full humans and non-humans, which makes targeting racial violence the only rubric that can end violence, and anything arbitrarily or I mean, it's the AF is a performance of love and care, which we have defined as good.
Okay, I'm not understanding how the AF solves the impacts that you provide.
Because black malpractice is a breach from the performative tactics by forefronting forms of life that center care and love, analyzing the ways in which we are already working through and holding each other up.
Okay, cool. I'll take some preps right now.
You're muted if you're saying things.
Okay, sorry, my bad. Give me a second real quick. Cool. Okay, so before I start my speech, just a quick couple of thank yous. First, my mom, dad, my sister, without whom I couldn't have done this. They gave me so much support. Second, to Lambersville Unified School District for supporting our speech and debate program. Thirdly, to my team, Mrs. McCoy and Mrs. Garcia, you've been a tremendous help in my debate career, and all my teammates, you rock, and I can't wait to see y'all underclassmen rise. To all my friends inside and outside of debate, Rithvik, Sarish, Joanne, even like Joshing, Nico, you guys have helped me out so much and have made this journey of speech and debate a lot more comforting and have inspired me to do so much. Thank you so much to everyone. And with that, I will send out the 1NC. All right, Daniel, let me know when you got it.
Pull it up. Yeah, one sec. All right, I got it. 3 sheets.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
One sec. Let me just grab one more piece of paper. I'm good. Sorry if I was muted when I said that.
All right, cool. First off, the 1NC is called the Black Malpractice is not liberation from the exploitative tendencies of capitalism and debate, but instead of reunification of the capacity through the affirmation of the resilient subject in the production of intellectual labor into the affective economy. The 1NC's public performance of trauma are consumed and recycled as fodder to justify unending globalized intervention against Black life in the global periphery. James 15. Resilience must be performed explicitly, legibly, and spectacularly. Overcoming must be accomplished by in a considerable manner. Overcoming of the type of affective labor which is production to the extent of the public performance is tuning to resilience and feedback into the power supply race has always been a visible identities. Look, I overcame is easy to juxtapose. Fanon, level black man Fanon argues has no ontological resistance to the LIO. He cannot return from the white man's gaze. The LIO narratives from the difference of Fanon and the resilience discourse damage brought by the white male gaze is a necessary prerequisite for subjectivity, agency, and mutual recognition. Resilience turns objectification being looked at into a subjectification. Overcoming it makes it look like more efficient and profitable than simple objectification could ever be. Recognized and affirming the effective labor of the resilient performer. The perspective defines itself feeds the performer's individual. Overcoming into a second order therapeutic narrative or appropriation of overcoming is our evidence of our own overcoming in the past prejudices. NWSP resilience, the resilience of our women contrasted with the supposed fragility of the third world woman of color. The resilience of some African American women is contrasted to the contributed fragility of other African American women who reinforce classist distinctions. Conversations about the third world woman are versions of white saviorist narratives meant to display the MRWASP's own resilience. Look, I overcame upgrades by recycling objectification to overcoming compounding looking so that one can profit off of others' resilience. And the feel-good illusion of freeing debate for complicity and domination expands collective resilience on the state of exploitation. Hoop 10. Cries announcing demise of university and all those who can do this to renew original mandate of the university, fostering truth, justice, and democratic debate. These projects hope to subvert elitist managerial universities face the problems of radical alternative neoliberalism because the future objects of their own critique or communication and trade are intimately connected through circulation. The essential process of capitalism to the end of itself, cultural production are subsumed circulated as capital. Speed elitism replaces Eurocentrism as the primary nexus around which disparities are organized. Utopian fantasy and network space outside the traditional academic borders of radical space for a state of exploitation because technological travel and communication figures as well liberation discourse spreads violent colonial capitalist patriarchal history, history, and ultimately this does not only render the affirmative meaningless, but it reproduces it with logic of individualism which supports white supremacy. The alternative is to refuse the affirmative project and academia along with it. That's Tucker Yang 14. We ask not coherently, not rhetorically, what knowledge does the academy deserve beyond narratives of pain they may be language experiences and wisdom's best left alone. We might think that this is a differentiation between what is made public and what is kept sacred. These are stories that must be entrusted to us, yours that are told to us, and we make meaningful relationships with the participation of our work. This is not just a question of getting permission to tell the story. Permission is situates collective wisdom as an individual. Property be signed away. This is equally true of stories. Power will never sign such a permission, so there are always stories that we overhear because when our research is going well, we are really into people's lives. Though this is tempting, although this will be easy to do, these stories are not simply ours to take people who are underrepresented in the academy by social location, frequently experience the pressure to become the native informant, adding to the complexity. Many of us look to the work of the academy and our family and community legacies have been researched after the research we carry source from our grandmother's labs and breaths from the below the deck from the run, from the inside classes, from the enclaves. We carry proof of our oppression on our backs under our fingertips, and we carry proof of survivance, at the heart of survivance. The role of the ballot is to interrogate systems of semiotics. The only way we can uncover the reach of capitalism, fight against it by 9.
Critiques of political economy are now insufficient. Semiocapital is the capital flux that calculates the semiotic artifacts without materializing itself to understand semiocapital's infinity game of mirrors. We must outline a new disciplinary field delineated by three aspects. One, the critique of the political economy through connective intelligence, the semiology of linguistic economic fluxes, and the psychochemistry of infosphere atmosphere that studies the psychopathogenic of effects of economic development in the human mind. The process of digital production is taking a biological form. The conditions are created for the realization of new form of economic systems centered around what can be defined as the business at the speed of thought. Humans' minds and flesh are integrated with digital circuits thanks to the interfaces of acceleration and simplification. The model of bioinfo production is emerging as the produces semiotic artifacts with the capacity of auto replication through living systems. Cyberpanicon is inserted in the fleshy circuits of human subjectivity. Cybernetics finally becomes life information for our vital fluids. Second off. Interpretation: the affirmative must garner offense when the resolutional statement resolve. Predictive policing is unjust. Resolve means a policy. Resolve is determined by legislature to establish law. And predictive policing is the use of algorithms as to forecast crime. And IJ 14. Predictive policing harnesses information and computer models anticipating likely crimes events. Predictions focus on demographic trends and vote negative for grounded research. Even if the topic is not best for activism, it's the only way to effective way to create sustained dialogue between both sides that can predict it in advance. Tune-up benefits versus limits. Determining the ground based on not the topic, but in the whim of the apps, destroys the possibility of being neg moves all research. Ground and forces us to unrefined and unprepared scholarship. They'll always be one step ahead because they can prepare for a year on a handful of arguments that we've only dedicated to research just this topic, which turns the entire debate into a monologue, not a dialogue. And research scooping ground from the same bucket for 4 years of literature incentivizes the best amount of research. Now, defending the resolution means that they'll always have the high ground, causes dogmatism, and forces the neg into generics. The margins of literature destroys good scholarship. The app is presumably false and refuse cross applications to T. We don't know if the app is alive because it hasn't been subject to rigorous scrutiny and procedural questions. Always determine the content of the SAS, which activates solves their offense, critiques of the resolution, or just as well as critiques of topical affirmatives, procedural fairness first. Debate is a competitive game that requires equal judgment of all arguments. They decide to sit down after time is started disclosed on the weekend speaking app, which concedes the authority of fairness. Drop the debater. One, abuse can be corrected, which means they should pay for the abuse of their ballot. Two, drop the argument, because essentially drop the AC, which is drop the debater. And three, drop the argument incentivizes 1 hour restart, which excuse against the neg time skew. And second, you should use competing interpretations. Anything else makes the app race to the margins of the topic, and the debate can't reasonably be topical or reasonably met with a definition. It's yes or no question, and no RBS on T. You choose the app, and you know the positions that you needed to defend, which makes RBS logical. And TVA solves your offense. Read the app and how offense is how predictive policing hurts black bodies. That's O'Donnell 19, and I've inserted in the doc. Third off. Interpretation: non-black debaters must not read ontological claims of black social death. The violation is Carter 19. I included the quotation in the document. Vote neg. It objectifies blackness and will always be merely a theoretical independent voter for inclusion, which is necessary for the very structure of this activity. And this is also another link to the semio-capitalism critique. Evidence 15. Non-black debaters use the pessimism to reduce black people to this is the perversity of the argument in the hands of non-black debaters. They focus on anti-blackness has also become an excuse for non-black debaters to focus on the black audience position by violence. If you're white Afro-pessimist, you should understand your existence is complicit in the violence. Your engagement with the argument will always be theoretical and objectifying. Afro-pessimism is not about white people. If Fannin points out that the black-white economy cannot exist. Vote for inclusion. Without inclusion, people will flee debate because they cannot engage in the space without being confronted with the trauma that they are trying to escape. Cross-white voters from the T-shell framing. On the case, first framework. No vote neg on presumption. There's no clear link as to how the app solves the harms, so the impacts are bound to happen. Case proper. Permutation vote app for no reason. Vote neg for no reason. The case and impact are doing anything, which means that the impact on any impact of the 1AC wins offense for us, and all their arguments are defensive. The argument that violence is inevitable just creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not a reason to reject the app because their forthcoming argument about violence releases the energy is what's happening right now to black bodies. There's no risk of even trying the. There's no risk of trying the negative advocacy, which means that you should not vote out. Open for cross.
All right. Okay, let's start off with the third off-case position. When did I make an ontological claim about black social death?
I inserted the link in the doc. I inserted the quote.
Yeah, I'm just asking you to explain. Like, how is that line that you inserted an ontological claim about black social death?
So you make a claim as to how in the Carter 19 evidence, quote, blackness becomes a representation of death and darkness, which must be staved off as the horizon of death to secure proper life. This statement essentially is like, it's an essentialization and a summary of like black ontologization, which is the basis of like your ontological terror claims that you make in the affirmative.
When did I talk about ontological terror?
Process.
When did I have not made any claims about ontology. So
you have made claims about like ontological and structural oppressions of black people.
like black people are structurally oppressed, but when have I made an ontological claim?
But this is an ontological claim.
Like, it doesn't have to say ontology to be an ontological
Okay,
claim.
saying
You are saying, quote, blackness becomes death.
becomes a representation of death, a line which you did not highlight.
You read highlights, might I remind you. You read highlights. Blackness becomes death was what you read.
That's not. Okay. So how do you interrogate systems of semiotics?
How do I interrogate systems of semiotics? I question whether the affirmative is a meaningful project through its use of semiotics, and my stance on that is it isn't.
Okay. So how do you interrogate it? By like answering case?
I interrogate the affirmative. I interrogate the affirmative as a meaningful use of semiotics.
How?
What do you mean how? I read it, like the links, I guess, if you want
Okay.
that answer.
You say I must garner offense from the resolutional statement. What counts as offense from the resolutional statement?
Well, I would say offense comes from like stating directly that predictive policing has caused some harm.
What
in this
is
situation.
what counts as a direct cause? What counts as predictive policing directly causing harm? To give me
Okay, so I've included a definition of predictive policing in the shell itself. This delineates what predictive policing is, and like you need to have offense tailored to this definition since you haven't provided one of your own.
I mean, what counts as offense?
Like any argument that states why predictive policing is bad, but specifically predictive policing.
Okay, 5 minutes starting now. Okay, I'm sending it to you. 1 sec, just one card. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm good.
Sorry, just getting up on my stand. Okay. The creation of civil society depends on the capture of blacks to create the psychic structure of the Western white man through the dual process of enslavement and gratuitous violence. Think of the high interest debt loaded onto Ferguson alongside of Michael Brown. This enables social codes of whiteness that prefigure what we think is life and infuse it with value, and only the contradistinction of blackness and other modalities delivering that terrorize the proper life of whiteness supposed to be killed. This is the fluid process of marking bodies as non-human that infuse the world of man with value. The social code of the Western white world cannot be disaggregated from performances of being like the proper citizen that constantly assemble and fit the terms of order. Performances are not just out, but in here. The ritual call to assemble in the terms of clash, limits of fairness, and education obfuscate the practices of life which resistance drains the social energy necessary for endurance. Vote F to endorse black malpractice as a strategy to unenlist from this performance in favor of a form that prioritizes care and love. When production is demanded, you should be willing to step aside. Not only this focus finds the ways we hold up each other that recharge the social energy of endurance. Take groups like the Black Panther Party, We Charge Genocide, No Dapple, and the Slaughter's Daughters to take new forms of generative life. On presumption, first, the F is a performance of love and care, which we have defined is good. Secondly, we defend a model of debate that is good for marginalized bodies. Third, this is an independent voter. Their attachment to making everything look productive results in knee-jerk reactions like the cops being called on black debaters when their actions are interpreted as acting wrong. And presumption is violent because their need to have quick fixes pathologize the repetitive process of care. It's not a movement. That's above. And also, Bataille is not us. That's the overview. Doing things is good. Sitting around lets violence escalate. And the one has misunderstood our theory of violence. It's not contingent, but every condition of racial terror that positions blackness as constant pathology needs to be eliminated. And they have not grappled with our thesis that social energy is low. Now, this energy is key to survival for marginalized bodies and allows for social interconnection. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to give an order, but T is going to be after this. Becomes militarized and a war on itself and war on each other that is taken to be necessary and good a part of modernity, and their calculus can't grapple with it and causes incalculable violence of survival and existence being tied onto itself. Onto T. Suspend procedurals. Their model requires the identity to be left at the door. Political action out there trades off with theories of life and violence in here. Only debates about militant strategies provide the social energy enough through discussions of how to live, which are necessary to survive and navigate in this space in face of things like cops being called on black debaters and native debaters being called cheaters. Only our model can theorize the subject position that determines their access to their model. The counter is the app should defend a militant reading of the resolution. This solves all of your offense. Winning our unique in this question proves it's readable, it's predictable for marginalized students, and as militancy becomes tied to the process of living in the face of bounds. This case and graver evidence provides examples of this, like the Sabatis versus the BBB testing strategies, which resolves any idea that Clash and Offense think you have. Fairness is not an impact, but an internal link to Clash and idea testing is arbitrarily determined by community norms at the time and always skewed by condo peaks and an infinite advantage counterbalance. And the topic having 100 countries that use predictive policing and an infinite number of subsets independently. Unfairness is good. Vote after trace the code that sees the way ballots induce neurochemical responses in relation to what we see as good. Onto the TVA. The TVA is a counter advocacy with no solvency advocate and shouldn't win around. So question of models not independent or. Onto the K. Capitalism has shifted to the logistical code that looks to capture life as a form of assembling the production of line proven by things like predictive policing and mass incarceration to fix certain bodies as marked as dangerous to productivity. This is proven by things like the AIDS crisis and the crack epidemic. To remove deviant bodies and keep production flowing constantly in all aspects of life, like constant self-improvement ideology and need to always be on call. Marking people as non-deviant humans is necessary to create populations outside of like the worker capitalist binary to extend credit and to reinvest surplus value while sending excess steel to Africa to open new markets through railroad construction. Also, there's a symmetry just had. It's not radical to. Quickly, the third off, get better at reading the card. Evidence is specific to how racialization is a fluid process determined by cultural and political factors over time, but it's a reason to reject the team. And signing black scholarship, a radically particular, always pessimism, performative, anti-black that reifies the white scholarship and can't think of black scholarship as a general way of theorizing
Let's see. I think I had a minute of prep. Real quick question. I'll just start prep. Wait, what was the response you made on the third off?
I said, get better at reading. The Carter evidence is specific to how racialization is a fluid process determined by cultural and political favors over time, but it's a reason to reject you. Assigning Black scholarship to radically particular as always pessimism is performative anti-Blackness that reifies white scholarship and can't think of Black scholarship as a general way of theorizing violence.
Okay, did you read the perm? No?
I didn't read the card, no.
Okay, what were the responses to the critique?
I said that there's a symmetry dissad. It's not radical to copy the cops. Using the form of the system against itself results in like making fun of police officers, which would get activist kills. And it's extremely insensitive right now in the time of like all the protests around the US. Independently, that copying can only re-territorialize the system. Power and governance has diffused through the code to guide how we live our lives. That internalization is what the code wants, to get more and more access instead of you just prefer care for each other. And that's the Carney evidence.
Okay, cool. It's going to be, let's see. I'll start on the AC, then it's going to be K, third off. No independent reason to reject the team on framework, right? Okay, cool. Okay. Good. Hey Daniel, you good?
Yeah, I said yeah. I'm sorry. I just nodded. I thought you probably the doc open.
Oh, sure. Good. No doc. Don't vote on this independent voter on presumption of the ACD. Independent voter is not framed correctly to only give them a new 2AR framing. At the end of the day, this independent voter should just be dropped the argument as any other argument would be in this, as any defensive argument would be in this debate. So don't vote on the independent voter. Critique. They mishandle this critique. They read a long overview that doesn't make any sense. But the link we're going for is the co-option link. That's the James 15 evidence, which tells you that which tells you that movements get co-opted. Look at the co-option of the Black Lives Matter movement through random through the random Instagram chain, which is like tag 10 people and then pass it on. It's literally a commodification of the movement, trying to create like capital, trying to create capitalist movements from a movement that is morally good. This is problematic for a couple of reasons. The first is that it gets the movement nowhere. Co-option means that the university the university or the state just co-opts the movement, and the co-opts the movement, understands the movement, and then reacts to the movement in a worse way. That means that the affirmative method of care and love is pretty the affirmative method of care and love is lost in the fact that it gets co-opted by the state and turns into something that the state can now combat. Which means that at the end of the day, you don't see the harms of the affirmative get solved because they're getting constantly co-opted by the state. The second reason why the co-option link is it turns the affirmative is because it basically causes okay. So the affirmative also links into the co-option decide because they try to create an aura of care and love, which is actively doing something, which means any active doing of something contributes to the capitalist market. And insofar as the capitalist market is what controls the world, through things like co-option, through methods like co-option, they turn their own method into the state. They specifically tell you that the state they specifically tell you in 1AC cross-examination that the state is bad, which means that the co-option of their method into the state would lead to the harms that we talk about in the critique. The harms that they misunderstand the alternative, which is why they read the symmetry dissad. The symmetry dissad doesn't respond to the alternative altogether. Our alternative is not to semiotically rupture. They are trying to respond to Baudrillard. Our alternative is simply that we want to reject
the affirmatives project of trying the affirmatives feel-good project and try to reject academia along with it. We are rejecting the university's claim to the affirmative. We are rejecting the affirmatives claim because if it gets co-opted by the state, then the state can fight against it. If we don't affirm the affirmative, then we don't allow the affirmatives project to get co-opted, and we don't allow the state to be able to fight back. We don't allow the state to be able to fight back. The K is an a priori issue to the critique. The K is an a priori issue to the affirmative, because if the affirmative gets co-opted, then there's no benefit to the affirmative. Let's see. That's fine on that. Also, they've conceded a role of the ballot argument, which is the BIFO 9 evidence that talks about how our first job is to interrogate systems of semiotics. Insofar as the negative doesn't do that, you extend our role of the ballot across. They haven't extended a counter framing mechanism, which means that their form of interrogating semiotics is bad in comparison to the negative, because we're winning the co-option link, which functions as an independent dissad under our framework. The non-black voter. They've mishandled this voter. They should have allotted a lot more time to this, because we're going for it hard. They try to give you this argument that we should get better at reading evidence because the Carter 19 evidence says something else. No, the Carter 19 evidence ontologizes blackness. It literally says that blackness becomes that this is nothing but an ontologization of blackness, in stating that civil society is condemned against blackness. That's the reason that the affirmative doesn't act within the state, is because they claim that the violence is not contingent, as my opponent claims in the 1AR, but is based on structural issues. Just because they didn't say the word ontology doesn't mean that that's not what they mean. They say that blackness. They say that black people are condemned to social death within civil society, which is the definition of ontology. That's the Carter 19 evidence that comes back and back again. Even if they claim that this evidence is trying to say something else, like I can't look at the evidence and infer what the evidence is trying to say. I'm reading the evidence, and that's exactly what it says, which means that you still link to the entirety of the shell. The shell is very, very specific. You should not be reading this argument. You should not be reading these arguments for the sake of inclusion. You are actively commodifying black literature and are trying to use it to gain a ballot, or trying to advocate for it when you aren't in the positionality to be able to argue for it in the first place. Which means that this is an independent voter for the fact of inclusion. Even if procedurals don't matter, this is an ethical responsibility for you to be cautious on what you read. This is not a procedural argument, which means that your procedural is bad argument on the framework shell goes moot. On the framework shell, a quick thing. Your counter-interpretation is a performative contradiction against your own affirmative. You explain that your counter-interpretation is defending a militant reading of the resolution, but a militant reading of the resolution does not promote care and love. It promotes militarism, which is what a part of the Carter evidence, which is what the second piece of evidence in your AC critiques, which means that you are an act of your own problem. Don't defend a militant reading of the resolution if what you want to create is a society of care and love.
223 starting now. it's going to be sorry, the third off and then the K. Well, actually, no, actually I'll do case first and then T and then the K. Okay. Are you good? Okay. Wait, I'm sorry, I cannot find that. Actually, that's fine. The only thing they have left is presumption on case, which they just say in their last reason that it's not a voter for them. So they have no other offense on case. They didn't extend the inda of batai, which is not even what the AF is. Onto the third structural theories are not the same thing as an ontological claim about the capacities of certain bodies. The evidence is an interview that J.K. Carter gave, which was very specific about blackness and whiteness being something outside of pure identity and tied to structural persistence. Don't claim to be reading the evidence and refuse to actually read the evidence. It says it says white folk gotta do something, but your homogenization is extremely balanced. This things all black scholars uses Wildersonian Afro-pessimism, which is performative anti-blackness since it misinterprets and shifts what black scholarship says to treat it as an object of negation and make arguments to win a debate. And that's something done in rounds, which is an independent reason to reject the team for being found, which was not entered in the 1AR. And additionally, militancy is not equal to violence, but it's about preserving communities. We define it as a process of resistance and survival, which is what love and care do. We talked about being in here and before out there. Only the 1AC theorizes a model of debate that provides resistance strategies and debates over how to endure the violence of majority, like the Zapatistas versus the BPP. That's key to subject position and theorizing, which is a prior question to taking the action that their K endorses. Onto the K proper, they talk about movements getting co-opted, but don't explain how. Just say the state will co-opt your movement for love by reading the, but they don't articulate this at all. They say that doing actions of, well, I also extend the F. They say that trying to create love and care gets co-opted by capitalism because it's taking an action. This makes no sense. By that same logic, they are also by cutting cards that creates something for capitalism to take. It's obviously a silly argument. It makes no sense. On the role of the ballot, they didn't answer the symmetry disadvantage. They simply said, oh, they're trying to answer Baudrillard and rejected it. You should, the symmetry disadvantage is still there, which is just going to lead to, oh, also, the 1AC is not a movement and it doesn't go anywhere. The 1AC is care and love, which is a horizontal organization that the state doesn't use. It looks like black queer ballrooms and Asada's daughters that care and love for each other, but not placing demands on the government. That looks like people hiding each other's or taking or covering up each other's faces and not posting pictures of each other as they go to ride so they don't get arrested or killed. But it's not a specific movement that's not going to get co-opted. If a cop wants to delete someone's face or delete someone's picture so they don't get arrested, I mean, that's fine, but they haven't proven how it gets co-opted. They have no offense to roll of the ballot. They didn't answer the disadvantage. Vote F. Good debate.
Good debate, man.